gamers, Power Word Heal here, and today we're going to talk about should you get rank 14 on a healing priest in WoW Classic for healing PvE specifically. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but I wanted to get this video out now because we're kind of coming close to that cutoff period, I would say, where if you want to be rank 11 by the time the next phase of the PvP ranking unlocks, which is rank 11 to rank 14, then you should start to consider, starting to get honor now, because it's approximated that we have about 4 weeks before Blackwing Lair comes out, and 4 weeks is exactly the amount of time it takes to go from 1 to rank 11 if you hit the honor cap every week, basically, if you get the max amount of honor you're able to get. So we're going to talk about that stuff later in the video, what all that means, kind of. But I just wanted to put that out there, that we are kind of getting close. Now, the one thing is we don't know exactly when they're going to release the ranking after Blackwing Lair. So, for example, some people think it's going to be like a week after Blackwing Lair they're going to allow us to go to rank 14. Some people think it's like 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm personally more of the camp that I think it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks. I think that they don't want people getting the weapons like very quickly. I think that's like the entire point of this, right? So I'm assuming like 3 to 4 weeks after Blackwing Lair release is when we'll get the ability to start getting to rank 14. But keep in mind, even if they do 3 to 4 weeks after, then we still have to rank for, I think it's again 3 or 4 weeks. So it's going to be essentially probably 8 weeks after Blackwing Lair releases, is my guess. However, there is the possibility that it is like 1 week after Blackwing Lair, right? So if that is the case, then it would behoove you to start preparing now, right, and just get your rank 11 before Blackwing Lair comes out. That way, as soon as they remove the restriction, you are caught up with everybody else, and you can get to rank 14 as quickly as possible. So that's kind of why I'm putting the PSA out there. And we're going to talk about how all that ranking stuff works later in the video, but we're going to do a bunch of things in this video. So the first is we're going to compare the individual pieces of tier 2 gear, or whatever the equivalent we'll be using in that slot, to the ranking gear. Okay. Then we're going to talk about the actual set bonuses, right, if any of those are useful. We're going to talk about mixing the two sets of gear, right? So what's the ideal mix, okay? And then we're going to also talk about if you can't get certain pieces at tier 2, what pieces are good fill-ins from the PvP set, right? Because keep in mind, the PvP gear is completely deterministic. If you get the amount of honor, you're going to get the gear, right? There's no RNG on the drop, there's no RNG on the loot council or anything like that. So that's something to consider when we're talking about these pieces, right? And then finally, we're also going to talk about kind of like the time investment, how ranking works in general. And I feel like we didn't really bother to do that in the last video because it's only rank 11. You can get rank 11 by just kind of like getting 150k honor per week and not really caring much, right? But in this video, I feel like it's more important to talk about how you actually get the rewards, because the problem is like you could seriously underestimate how much honor you need to get, and then the last phases be struggling to get it, and maybe you just don't have the amount of time in your schedule to get it, and that would be good to know before you start the rank 14 grind, right? As opposed to when you're on the weeks for rank 13 and rank 14, right? So we're gonna try and cover all of our bases here. So we'll kind of start right. I'll just show you the tabs first, and then we'll kind of get into things. So this is for basically BIS Blackwing Lair with tier 2. This is Blackwing Lair phase with a PvP gear. And then this is like a combination of the two. We're going to reference these as we go throughout the video. And the reason why we're comparing it to Blackwing Lair gear is because that is the phase that it'll be out in, right? So we'll have all of this stuff available. So I think it just makes sense to compare it to stuff like that, right? And so we'll go piece by piece, like I said, and then we'll move on to talking about other things. And something that I want to talk about before we get into like specific pieces is the value of spirit. So the value of spirit is going to be changed, and that's because if you notice, we have tier 2, so we have the 15% of mana regeneration to continue while casting. Now remember, we have meditation already, which is 15%. So this is an additional 15%, so it doubles the amount of regen we have available while casting. And if you remember, the calculation that we did for how much spirit is equivalent to 1 MP5 while casting, right, was about 10 spirit equals 1 MP5 while casting. Okay, now since we've doubled how useful regen is, right, that means that it only takes like 5 or 5.5 spirit to, or 5 point something, probably like 5.2, 5.1 to equal 1 mana per 5 seconds. Okay, so that's a huge like boon for us, basically, right? Like spirit becomes a lot better in this phase once you have the 3-piece. It's no longer something to be completely slept on. And then keep in mind, if you do have this talent, like if you are the Holy Hybrid build, you have Spiritual Guidance, then you're also getting impact from spirit there as well. So that's going to be important to consider as we go through this video, because when you look at things, you're going to realize that there's no spirit on these pieces, right? They're basically, well, on the actual PvP pieces, they're all spirit int. And that would have been something that kind of would have been great for us before. We would have been thinking, well, there's a lot of stamina, but, you know, hey, at least there's no spirit, right? Spirit's not really a good stat. But now spirit is like a lot better than it was, okay? So something to consider there, and we're going to be talking about it as we go through the pieces. So we're starting off with the helmet, and the helmets, we're just going to compare it stat-wise. So we'll do the intellect and the healing first. So it's 27 int and 48 healing, right? So basically the same amount of int here, right? -1 int. And then we have plus 15 healing for the tier 2, minus 15 healing for this. And we have more stamina, obviously, on the PvP gear. Now, you look at this and you'd be like, ooh, we have a juicy 4 mana per 5 seconds here, right? That we don't have on the other piece. But if we go and look at the spirit, okay, we see there's 22 spirit. So basically, if we assume 5 spirit to 1 MP5 approximately, right, we basically have like 4 mana per 5 here. So we actually have an equivalence in terms of mana per 5 seconds. And keep in mind, that's only while casting. While we're not casting, the Halo of Transcendence actually gets more value, right? Because the spirit is more valuable than the MP5. You know, just if you're not casting at all, okay. So, and then it also has value, remember, with Spiritual Guidance. So overall, Halo of Transcendence is, you know, the better piece here. It's not like a super gap, but it does exist, and especially in just terms in PvE stats, it is the better piece. So, yeah, that's for Halo of Transcendence. And Pauldrons of Transcendence. So, we have 25 intellect, okay, and 26 healing. So let's go, and we'll compare. Okay, so we actually have less intellect and 1 less healing. So these are very similar as well, right? And then you also basically, keep in mind, you have 2 MP5 on these, essentially, right? Or close to 3, really. But we'll say like 2 and change, okay? Then you're also getting the fire resist, just like you're getting on the helmet, which is also going to be useful in Blackwing Lair. So when you compare these two, again, it's just not really a contest. The tier 2 are just strictly better, right? They're not better by a ton, but they are better. Moving on to the chests. This is another one that's going to be kind of deceiving at first because you have 27 intellect and 57 healing. We come into here. We have 28 intellect, so what are we, like, down 1? Yeah, down 1 intellect. And then, but we're up, like, looks like another 15 healing in this case. But we have the MP5 again, right? But if we come over here and we look over here, we see that we basically have 3 MP5 from the spirit, okay? So, you know, we're down 1 MP5. We're trading 1 MP5 for, like, was it like 15 or something healing? Okay, then we have the fire resist on top of it. Then this could also be used as a piece for your 3-piece, right? So realistically, you know, even though they're very similar items, the Transcendence beats out the PvP tier again. right? And pretty easily, I would say. We don't have any equivalent for the slot because there's no PvP. I mean, the PvP bracers are just really bad, right? So you'd always use something like Prophecy. And then we'll actually we'll look at what the Transcendence one is here too. So it's 1% crit, 29 healing, and 20 int. So we'll go look at this. So we have 13 int, very low int, and 20 some healing. Okay, so these gloves are really bad in my opinion because you're not going to be using Mind Blast at all, so the effect is basically worthless, and they have very low int and kind of low healing. And you'll notice even if we go to the Prophecy ones, which I prefer using, right, you basically get like 9 MP5 from these gloves. You still have more intellect, and you only lose like, 5 healing? So yeah, the PvP gloves are terrible, and I would never use these under any circumstance, okay? Belt slot is kind of like the same thing. There's no really PvP belt that's decent, so you're always going to be using your epic belt. General's legs, okay? So we'll compare these to the Leggings of Transcendence. So 21 int and 46 healing, okay? Oops, okay. So 21 int, so same amount of int, and 46 healing on the other one, and 32 healing here. Okay, and then we have 4 mana per 5 seconds. And if we go back, okay, we have 21 spirit. So again, if we're doing 5 spirit to 1 MP5, we basically have equivalent mana per 5 just in the spirit alone, and then we have 7 extra mana per 5 on this. Okay. So the tier 2 legs in this case are just much better than the PvP legs. There's the same amount of intellect. You're just gaining a little bit of plus healing and 7 MP5 basically. It's not even close. Plus all the other potential effects of spirit if we're not in combat, right? Or from the talent that we talked about. So those legs are much better. And then we'll look at the boots. Okay, so 18 intellect and 23 healing, right? So look into these boots. So these boots just crush the boots, the PvP boots, right? But these are gonna be kind of hard to get. We'll talk about replacing we'll talk about different options for the slots as well. But like even these boots are just so much better than the PvP boots, right? 3 MP5 essentially, 17 intellect, 30 some healing with 17 int. Again, 18 int, 23 healing, no MP5, right? These are better, in my opinion. Just way more MP5 than anything else. The Azuragos boots are better. The Prophecy boots are even better. Again, 3 MP5, basically the same amount of intellect, basically the same amount of healing, right? So when we compare all these like 1-to-1, we notice that the weakest piece by far is the gloves, right? And then it's kind of like the boots and the leggings, right? And then the helm, the chest, and the shoulders are kind of like all the decent pieces, okay? And that's kind of what we're going to get into now. We're going to talk about kind of like what we'll do is we'll talk about the perfect like matching between the sets, and then we'll talk about potential substitutions if you can't get all of your tier gear. Okay, so this is the matching, right, between the tier 2 and the PvP gear. Like if you had everything, what I would use, right? And you'll notice that we don't wear any of the PvP gear. So if you have all the tier 2, there's basically no reason at all, in my opinion, and the tier 1 where it's applicable. There's no reason at all to ever equip a PvP set piece for the armor in PvE. And if you notice the set bonuses here, even with all the set bonuses, it doesn't really change anything. And why is that? Well, if you remembered in the first video, when we were talking about comparing the rank 11 gear, rank 0 to 11 to Prebis, right? there were in some cases with some of the better pieces, which again I think was mostly like the chest and the helm and stuff like that, and potentially the shoulders. Those pieces, more of an argument could be made to use 2 of them, because you actually had the 23 healing bonus as the first bonus, right? Which means that it was a lot easier to access. In this particular case, that is the 6-piece bonus, and you only get 20 stamina as the 2-piece. So what that means is that, you're just never really getting access to that 6-piece bonus unless you're really griefing yourself and using the most terrible pieces as well. We already talked about how bad the gloves are, the boots aren't very good, the pants really aren't that good. So you really have to use these kind of bad pieces in order to access the 6-piece bonus. And even if you use some of the pieces that aren't quite as bad, like if you use like the pants or something, you're still you have to include all of them, right? So you have to include the gloves, and just on the gloves alone, you're getting beaten up so hard that it's basically just not worth it for the 6-piece, right? So the first thing to take away is if you're looking for actual bis or like max gear, you're not going to use any of the armor at all, okay? And the one thing we didn't cover yet is the weapons, right? So we're going to compare the weapons, and you'll see here that I do actually have the weapon being better. And so what do you have normally? You have Benediction, okay? So we have 106 healing, 31 intellect. And we're going to come over here, and we're going to look. Okay, so we have basically 167 healing. Okay, so basically 60-ish healing difference in the weapon. And then in the intellect, we forgot to put this here. Okay, yeah, so we basically have a 60-ish healing difference just in the weapon itself, and then you have the 14 int plus the 8 int, right? So we have 22 int, so we're only like about 10 int less than the Benediction, okay? Which isn't really that significant. Plus, we're getting mana per 5 seconds, 6 mana per 5 seconds, which we're not really getting in the other setup. We're actually also getting 14 spirit, which means we're really getting 9 mana per 5 second, right? Which we don't have in the Benediction setup. Now, we are getting 2% crit, which is not nothing, right? And we are getting 12 spirit here, so we basically get 2 mana per 5. So we're gaining 7 mana per 5 with the rank 14 weapon. We're losing 10 int, we're getting 60 healing, we're losing 10 crit. We're basically getting like the same amount of stamina. So it is an upgrade in my opinion. Just in terms of the raw healing and the mana per 5, you can't really argue against it. 60 healing is not insignificant, right? And obviously like a 7 or so mana per 5 advantage edge is pretty good. It's about what you would expect as like a weapon upgrade for the next tier, right? The thing is, though, is ultimately, is 60 healing going to be that strong for you overall, right? And, with the extra 7 mana per 5. It's not really going to be that game-breaking in most cases, right? Because, again, most of your heals are flash heals. You're doing a lot of flash shielding, a lot of shielding. Your shield gets 10% of the healing, okay? So your shield basically gets 6 out of that 60, okay? And your flash heal is going to get around like 28, something like that per heal. So it's nothing crazy, right? But it is better. And the decision for whether you want to go for that or not is going to basically come down to what we're going to talk about later when we go through like how hard it's actually going to be to get this stuff, right? But the weapons are basically the main thing. That's the takeaway. Right? If you're going rank 14 for PvE, you're going for the weapons and the offhand, right? Because the gear itself tends not to be that great when compared to your actual tier 2. Now, we're in the hybrid section here, right? And I'm going to talk to you about some pieces that I would replace, okay? Or not necessarily replace, but if I didn't have the ability to get them from the raid, there are some pieces you can replace with the PvP gear that kind of makes sense. Okay, so this is going to be basically the BIS list for phase 3. right? Blackwing Lair phase. And we're kind of going to go through each item, and I'll talk about if I would replace it with the PvP gear equivalent piece, right? So we'll start on this side, actually, because I want to talk a little bit about the gloves here specifically because they use tier 1 set bonus. So I really like the tier 1 set bonus, especially because the tier 1 pieces, in my opinion, are pretty good. These are actually, in my opinion, better than your tier 2 bracers. If you look at them, I just think it's kind of obvious. So you're losing, like, basically, 9 healing, but you're gaining 2 MP5. I guess you're gaining, like, kind of 1 MP5 realistically, right? And, you're gaining an intellect. Like, they're basically kind of very similar is the idea, right? So if they're similar enough, I don't mind using them to get the set bonus. And that's kind of like the idea. These are very good. The gloves are very good. And the belt is, in my opinion, pretty decent still. Although some people would maybe disagree, but I think that the belt is pretty decent, so I don't mind running these 3. Now, the belt and the Van Bracers here don't have anything to do with the PvP set, so those are going to be basically being run anyways, right? And then your gloves are going to be in direct competition with the PvP gloves. Now, I would under no circumstances ever run these gloves over the Prophecy gloves. Like we said, the gloves are just terrible. So putting the Prophecy gloves here is easy, in my opinion, and it's an easy way to get your 3 set, right? You have a lot of control over whether you get this 3 set, honestly, because you can technically buy the girdle and the bracers, and you just need the Prophecy gloves. So that's kind of like my mindset right there in terms of comparing those gloves to the Satin General's gloves over here. Now, we're going to come to the boots, right? Would you ever run the General's boots? Pretty much never, I would say. In fact, I would definitely say never, because remember, we can't even get the 6-piece bonus of the 23 healing power because it's actually the 6-piece, not the 2-piece in this case. So there's just never going to be an option when I'm running those boots. You have Boots of Pure Thought, which are insane. You have Boots of Transcendence. You have Shimmer Geta, Snowblind, Prophecy. All of these are better. Technically, even something like this is, well, those aren't in the game. But I think even something like Boots of the Full Moon here are better. I think even the boots from UBRS are better. Like the ones with the fire resist on them. Wolf Runner's shoes could potentially be better, right? So, like, there's no reason really to ever run those general boots, right? So the gloves and the boots are just, we're never running those at all. Okay. Now, let's talk about the both the pants and the helm, right? So these are kind of interesting because the equivalent piece for each slot here is not awful. Remember, if we go back, right, we basically see that these are very equivalent, right? We're losing a little bit of plus healing. We have the same amount of MP5 basically. We don't have the MP5 in the PvP set as Spirit, which means that we don't get all the utility from it. We don't have the resistances, but they're very similar pieces, right? So you could absolutely replace your helm if you don't have it with the PvP set helm. The problem is that it's very easy to get the halo most of the time, right? And it's, in terms of the pants, these have been, you've been getting drops from Ragnaros since the game has basically started, right? So it's likely that many of the priests already have the pants. So these tend to be the easier ones to get because you're constantly running MC. You're running MC even when Blackwing Lair is out, and you already have a bunch of weeks of running these types of content, right? And this is on a shorter reset period, right? So you probably at least have the helm. The pants are a bit harder to get sometimes, and the PvP pants are, I would say they're somewhat close, but realistically, instead of running the PvP pants here, right, you would just run Padres, right? This is the Diarmall pants, right? So yeah, you would basically just run Padres. You could even run the Pants of Prophecy if you had those. Obviously, the Empowered Leggings are an option, but there's basically no reason to ever run the pants, in my opinion, because you can get the Padres piece, which is super easy to get because it just comes from a dungeon, and if you like have the better options, then you should use the better options, right? So I don't think we're not going to be using the gloves. We're not going to be using the PvP gloves. We're not going to be using the PvP boots. We're probably not going to be using the PvP pants, and we might use the PvP cowl, but it's going to be very easy to get our tier 2, right? And the other thing you want to keep in mind with the tier 2 versus the PvP set is that obviously the easy to get tier 2 pieces are kind of nice because you want to get that 3-piece tier 2 as quickly as possible, and getting the easy pieces can be really helpful in terms of just getting your 3 set online, right? So you're never going to want to change out your head for this head or something like that if it's going to break your set bonus, that's for sure. But you wouldn't really want to change it out anyway because, again, the tier 2 is just better outright, okay? Now, the robes and the mantle, right? So these are other pieces where I think there's kind of equivalences here, right? So if we compare the robe again to the Transcendence robe, again, we're basically we're gaining about 1 MP5. The intellect's basically the same. We're losing the resistances. We're losing about 15 healing. This is something you could easily swap in and have a very equivalent piece here, right? But keep in mind, you also have items like the True Faith, if you went for that, and Robes of the Exalted, which are very similar to Robes of Transcendence and Warlord Satin Robes anyway, right? So, although it is probably the second best piece to use here in terms of the PvP chest, right? It just really doesn't matter that much because you have so many options, right? It's kind of the question. So just something to think about there, right? And then the shoulders. So the shoulders are just very similar, right? So if we compare them here, same amount of healing basically, same amount of intellect, right? A little bit more intellect on these, but we're missing out on some MP5 and the resistances and stuff. So this is kind of another slot where, it's kind of acceptable to use the Warlord stuff. And I would say if you have 2 pieces that are kind of sketchier, right? If you have, let's say you have the tier 2 helm, right? But let's say you have the tier 2 helm, okay? But you don't have the Robes of Transcendence, and you don't have the Pauldrons of Transcendence, and you have just mediocre items, but you do have the PvP items, right? So you could put both of these on, right? And they'd be very similar effective healing wise, and you would also have the 20 stamina bonus, which isn't the biggest thing, right? Because we don't really care too much about stamina in PvE, but it would be something, okay? Now, the problem with that is at this point you don't have your 3-piece bonus. So I would only suggest something like this maybe if you were getting the boots in this case, right? So you could run the trans boots, the trans helm, and the trans legs, right? And this would be kind of nice because what this would allow you to do is you might already have the helm and the pants, right? So you only have to get the boots from the raid, okay? You're going to fill in your other slots with these, and they're going to be mostly equivalent. You're still maintaining your 3-piece or whatever, right? And, this could help you in terms of just navigating the loot situation in your guild if you want to set yourself up for something like Rejuve Gem or Caught Band or something like that, right? So, Pure Elementium Band. So you could do stuff like that, and I feel like that is this is probably the best mixing of the PvP set with the PvE sets, assuming you are going to use armor at all, right? And if you're not going to use armor at all, then again, the best thing to mix is just the weapons. Okay. So that's a pretty comprehensive look at the PvP set in general. and how it compares to the PvE set. But now we want to talk about, just what ranking, what does this entail, right? So basically how it works is, nowadays, there's just a maximum number for honor per week that you can get depending on what your current rank is, okay? So before, it compared you against other people, and you had to be within a certain percentile. That's completely gone. So now the entire population of the server could go from rank 1 to rank 4 on the first week of PvP ranking, right? Because everybody just needs to hit a number. And if you go to this website right here, I'll link it in the description. What it does is it shows you what rank you are, what progress you are into it. And if you can't tell the progress from your actual screen, there's an add-on called Ranker, which it basically does all this for you as well. So you don't even really need to use the website at that point, but it's easier to show things with the website. So you'd put your rank percent progress in your current rank, and it tells you what you need to get to basically progress and what's the max, right? So basically in order to progress at all, right? You basically, I think if you just get any honor, you progress to rank 2 the first week. But so this is the first step, kind of, right? These are all thresholds, right? So you see when we get 1125 on the first week, we go to rank 3, okay? If we go rank 3 0%, if we go to this, right, we go to rank 3 80%, okay? And if we get the maximum amount, we can get rank 1, which is 30-some thousand. We go to rank 4 60%. So what this means basically is you can go from rank 1 to 4 in 1 week, okay? And then depending on which threshold you hit, if you hit this threshold, not the max one, you can get to rank 3 80%, etc. These are all thresholds. That's all these markers are. So what we're going to do is we're kind of going to walk through. So from rank 1 to 4, right, is 30-some K honor, which is super easy to get. You're going to get this in your sleep. So you don't have to worry about that. So you can go to from rank 1 to rank 4, and then remember, it's rank 4 60%. So we're going to go to rank 4, then we're going to go 60%. Okay? And now the thing starts all over again. So, and it even tells you your max possible rank here. Right? So again, first threshold would be rank 5, rank 5 80%, rank 6 50%, and if you hit 110k, you can go to rank 7 20%. 110k should still be very easy. And we're talking about for Alterac Valley as a solo player, right? Obviously, if you're in a ranking group, then it's a no-brainer to do this stuff, right? But we're talking about how hard is this as a solo player. So pretty easy at this point still to get to rank 7, right? Now, keep in mind, you don't always have to get the maximum, right? So, you can get, just to progress from rank 4 to rank 5, right, you can get 20k. And then if you get 40k, you get a little bit more, right? And as this rank goes up, you're going to need a more minimum to progress, okay? So if we do, rank 5, you see the minimum goes up. Rank 6, the minimum goes up, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to the end. Okay, so as rank 4 is 60%, and then you get to rank 7, 20% if we go max. So we're going to go rank 7, 20%. So that was 2 weeks. This is our third week, right? And if we max out on the third week, we go to rank 9, 60%. Okay, so we go to rank 9, 60%. That was for 3 weeks. And then 4 weeks, this is where I am on my rogue right now. You actually only need to go to rank 11 because all your progress gets reset. So you didn't need to go to rank 11 40%. But, yeah, so you just need to get to 337,000 basically. And then you go to rank 11. And basically, this is how you get to rank 11 in 4 weeks, right? And then everybody's going to be starting rank 11 0% when the new ranking system comes out, okay? And you notice now, though, that the thresholds to actually even increase your rank are a lot higher, right? So it says next week, rank 11, 0%. This has been doing nothing, right? Because there's no decay anymore, keep in mind. Or at least there's no decay. You can't lose a rank, but you can decay within a rank, which means that you need to hit these minimum thresholds. So, okay, so you'll see that we're not gaining anything if we only get 160 some, still not gaining anything. We start to gain when we get, hit this 200 something threshold, okay? So we gain 50% progress towards rank 12 if we get 200 something K honor here, all right? And what this doesn't tell you, I think, which the add-on might tell you, is like what's the minimum amount of honor you need to prevent from decaying. But I think it's probably, I'm not really sure, honestly. It might be you either increase or you decay. So in other words, like, let's say I'm rank 11 and 1 week I do 256K, right? And then the next week I do 129K. It might just like bring me back down to 0, right? It might decay me, or maybe it decays me just a percentage. I'm not entirely sure how the decay works, but basically the idea is if you want to be gaining and not decaying, you need to at least hit one of these thresholds. So that's the important thing to keep in mind. You really shouldn't be trying to get to rank 14 and then allowing yourself to decay, because it's just going to make the process take a lot longer, right? And you're still investing quite a bit of time in those weeks where you're decaying, most likely, right? So, but if we go from rank 11 and we get the max amount that we can get rank 12, 24%, okay? So this is going to be the 5th week, technically, of ranking, all right? Now, we'll go to rank 12, and we're going to 24%, right? And, wait, is that correct? Let's go. I just want to double check this. So rank 11. Okay, rank 11 is 0%. And then we get the maximum amount of honor. Okay, so yeah, rank 12, 24%. Okay. So then if we get 500 the next week, we can get rank 12, 98%. Okay. Now, these are the weeks where you're starting to get 500K to max your progress, right? And this is where I kind of want to level with you guys. 500K is a lot of, it's a lot of honor. Like, for a solo player, at least. You're going to be playing a lot of AV. It is much more possible to do than it was before, because now you're not being compared against other people. So other people's, the amount of, like, effort they put in doesn't really matter, right? They can't they can't affect you in any way. However, it's still a lot of AV. If it's an AV weekend, it's not that bad, but 500K on a non-AV weekend is a lot, and it's just going to be, it's probably, like, if I had to estimate it, you're probably playing at least, I would say, at least like 8 to 10 hours a day. Probably. I mean, this can be a little bit interchangeable, right? Because if you work a lot during the week, what you could do is you could try and get as much as you can during the weekdays and then really go ham on the weekends, right? You could potentially even take like a day off if it was that important to you to ensure you hit the rank caps. Now, again, you don't need to hit 500K, right? You can hit 300 and something K and gain progress. But if you want to gain the max, it is 500K, right? So we're going to just assume that you hit the max for now, right? So rank 12, 98%. Okay. Oops, 98%. Okay. Now, it's kind of like the same. Now, the thing is that you see the minimum has gone up, though, right? So now, to hit rank 13 minimum from this particular thing, right, we need 337K. And if we want to be as far progressed into rank 13 as possible, we need another 500K. Okay? And if we go to rank 13 and then 34%, right? So here is where you're going to start to see the basic, like, this is the most amount of honor you're going to have to get, okay, ever, basically, like, to progress to rank 14. So to get, it's basically like 418k, okay? If you can get 418k per week, you will be able to eventually get to rank 14, no matter what, because we're 34% into rank 14. Going 418k brings us to 68%, and then if we go to 68%, you'll see that the next week we get rank 14 exactly if we do the same amount of honor, right? So the thing to take away is that to progress at all from rank 13 to rank 14, you're going to need 418k per week. So you basically only need to start hitting this 418k number in the rank 13 to rank 14 push, right? When you're rank 12 trying to get to rank 13, right, you can progress getting 337k, right? It's going to be slower, right? But you can progress doing that. See, we get 34%. It's going to take longer, right? Then you can progress by doing this. So, and 400 and some K is like, it's definitely different than 500k, but it's still a lot. Okay, 300k in my opinion is where it starts to get very like, oh wow, this is a grind. You know, if you're doing it yourself, you're doing it solo. Obviously, again, if you're doing it in a group, this is very easy to do. But if you're not, it's quite annoying. I would recommend, even if you are playing solo, if you're trying to do this, what you should be doing is you should try and get into Alterac Valley premades. Now, Alterac Valley premades are kind of different than like a Warsong premade, right? Because it's not like you're going to be expected to play with these people, like the same people. It's basically like a pug situation. Like you go into the Discord, you hop into a channel, and somebody is basically calling out which game to join. You join the game, and you hope that you get in the game with everybody else, and that's basically how that works, right? It's not necessarily something you're committing to for a long period of time. You're not like the 10th player, because the idea with the AV premades is that you can't really all get into the same one guaranteed, so you're just kind of trying to get into the same one together by queuing at the same time and stuff like that, right? So that is basically, it's like a more casual form of organized PvP. You can think of it as that, and it can help make your AV games a bit less painful, right? Because they're not complete pugs if you can get in with like 15 or 20 other people. But it's not as much of a commitment for you as to join like a high-end Warsong pug where not only do you have to play well, right, but also you have to commit to them for a certain period of time or whatever their schedule is, right? So it's a bit of a bridge between the two, and I would recommend trying to do that if you're going to get rank 14. But yeah, so it's a lot to grind as a solo player still. Before, it was basically like impossible to grind as a solo player. Not actually impossible, people have done it, but it was very difficult, and in some iterations of the game and some particular weeks it would have basically been impossible as a solo player, but now it's basically it's possible to get it on any week, and it's just going to be kind of a bit of a grind. Obviously you're going to have AV weeks mixed in, but the problem is you need multiple of these high honor weeks, right? So you're not really going to be able to just use AV week as like a big push week, because it's only going to cover for like one of the weeks. You're going to need like 3 or 4 high honor weeks basically to get rank 14. So the decision is kind of yours. What I would kind of recommend if you're on the fence about this and you don't know if you're even going to be able to do it or if you want to do it, is go right now and play AV in like non-AV weekend setting, and basically kind of get a feel for like, you know, how many games you're playing, how many hours you're spending, and how much honor you're getting, right? And you know, you can then extrapolate from there about how difficult this is going to be for you personally, right? you can kind of get an idea of like how much honor per hour you're getting, and then you know like, okay, so to get 500k, it's going to be this type of investment, right? So that's what I would recommend. If you're like completely new to this, you don't know how it works, you kind of just need to get your feet wet and start playing around with it and seeing how much time it takes for yourself, basically. So yeah, that is basically the video. Am I going to be getting rank 14? Not on my priest. I'm going to get it on my rogue. On the priest, I just think it's not worth it, really, unless you really care about being bis. The reason why is that the extra healing and the extra mana per 5 is just going to be completely inconsequential in most cases. Again, like on your flash heals, it's like an extra 30 healing. On your, it's probably just going to be mostly overheal anyway. On your shield, it's going to be an extra like 6 healing, which is not very good, right? And then, it's just a big time investment, right? And on the rogue, it's a lot different because the PvP weapons for the rogue are insane. And, if you're actually trying to PvP, you're trying to kill people in the world, the difference in damage is absolutely huge. Especially when you're doing something like playing like a backstab spec, right? Which is what my rogue is. Having the High Warlord dagger is just an insane difference over the normal dagger. And keep in mind, you're going to be ambushing some people, you're going to be critting people, or you're going to be backstabbing people a bunch, right? And just the difference between like using a lobotomizer and the High Warlord dagger, especially if you get like 2 crit backstabs or something with each, it's just insane. So on something like a damage class, it's a lot more noticeable, right? On something like a healing class, it's just not really very noticeable at all, to be honest. So probably not going to be getting it on the priest unless something else changes. But yeah, it's really just up to you. But I would not get it if you're a casual player. Most people who are going to get this probably already know they're going to get it, right? And I wouldn't recommend it if you're a casual player. It's not going to impact your healing whatsoever. If you're a better player, you'll still gap all the rank 14 healers in PvE, and it's just not going to matter. So yeah, that's basically my thoughts on it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry this was a bit of a long one, but sometimes it'd be like that, right? There's a lot of information to kind of go through and something like this. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you guys later.